I was organizing my phone when I accidentally opened a voice memo from my daughter. "I can't keep pretending to like her," she said to her husband. She sent it to me by mistake. I stayed silent. The next day they came over for Sunday dinner like always, and when my daughter walked in and saw me smiling, her face went white. Because subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. I was looking for the lentil soup recipe, the one with the cumin and a touch of lemon zest. I remembered I had asked Maya for it months ago, and she had sent a voice memo, saying it was easier than typing. My fingers scrolled through our message thread, past photos of her dog, links to articles, our good morning texts. There it was, a small audio file labeled Mom's Soup. I tapped it, set the phone on the kitchen counter, and turned to reach for my coffee mug. My daughter's voice filled the sunny room, but it was not the warm, chatty tone I knew. It was tense, low, a conspiratorial hiss. "I know it's Sunday tomorrow, Ryan. I can't keep pretending to like her." I froze, my hand suspended halfway to the mug. The voice continued, a rushed whisper. "The constant questions, the little sighs if I don't do things her way. That house feels like a museum, and I'm always an exhibit that's slightly wrong. I have to perform, and I'm so tired of it. I just needed you to know that, okay? I'll put on the face for dinner, but that's all it is. A face." A mechanical beep signaled the end of the recording. The birds chirped outside the window over the sink. The refrigerator hummed. I looked at my phone, the screen now dark. I finished the motion of picking up my mug. The ceramic was warm. I took a sip. The coffee was bitter. I had let it sit too long. I placed the mug back down on the counter, the click of it against the granite precise and loud in the silence. I looked around my kitchen. The morning light slanted across the bowl of lemons on the table. It gleamed on the copper pot hanging by the stove. It illuminated the framed photograph on the windowsill. Maya at 8, missing 2 front teeth, hugging me around the waist in this very kitchen. The room was exactly as it had been 3 minutes ago, yet now every object seemed to be watching me, complicit in a joke I had never understood. Pretending to like her. The words were physical things. They sat in the air, among the dust motes in the sunlight. They settled on the clean counters, on the leaves of the basil plant by the window. I picked up the phone again. My hands were dry and steady. I opened the message thread. I played the memo a second time. I needed to be sure. I needed to hear the specific inflections, the place where her voice broke not from emotion but from the strain of confession. I listened. It was not a joke. It was not out of context. It was a private truth, sent to her husband, meant for his ears only. A truth that had somehow, through a careless tap or a technological glitch, been delivered to me. A museum, an exhibit, a performance. I walked to the photograph. I traced the glass over my younger face, over her beaming, gap-toothed smile. That had not been a performance. That had been a child's pure, uncomplicated love. When did the pretending start? At what point did my questions become constant, my sighs become criticism, my home become a curated trap? I thought of the previous Sunday. Maya had complimented the roast chicken. She had laughed at a story about my gardening club. She had hugged me goodbye at the door, her perfume a soft cloud, a flawless performance. And I, the audience of one, had received it with genuine pleasure. I felt a cold, sharp shame. I had applauded my own humiliation. The recipe was forgotten. The soup would not be made. I had lost my appetite. My initial feeling was not anger. It was a profound, hollow stillness. It was the silence after a large object has fallen in a distant room. You feel the vibration in the floorboards, but the sound itself is over, leaving only a strange, ringing absence. I made a decision. I would not delete the message. I would not call her. I would not scream or cry or demand an explanation. Those were reactions for a real conflict, for a misunderstanding. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a fact she had stated clearly to the person she trusted most. Deleting it would be an act of cowardice, a perpetuation of the very pretense she claimed to despise. Calling her would grant her the drama she perhaps secretly wanted, the aggrieved mother, the emotional scene. I refused to play that role. Instead, I saved the audio file. I gave it a new name. I labeled it Memo. I placed it in a separate folder on my phone. It was no longer a misplaced recipe. It was evidence. The sun moved higher, warming the back of my neck. Sunday was tomorrow. She would come with Ryan. She would put on the face. And I, now knowing the face was a mask, would have to decide how to meet it. The rules had changed without my consent. I would need to learn the new game. I poured the cold coffee down the sink. I rinsed the mug. I dried it with a cloth and put it away in the cupboard. Each action was deliberate, a way to anchor myself in the physical world. The kitchen was just a kitchen. The photo was just a photo. The voice memo was just a digital file. I repeated these facts to myself. But as I stood there, the quiet house seemed to shift around me. The familiar clutter, the stack of books on the breakfast table, the basket of garden tomatoes, the Afghan draped over the chair, no longer felt like the trappings of my life. They felt like props. I was the curator of this museum, and I had just learned that my only patron viewed the collection with contempt. The hurt was a slow, rising tide, cold and heavy, but on its surface floated a thin, hard film of clarity. For years, I had interpreted her occasional distance as the natural reserve of a busy adult daughter. I had made excuses for her short replies, her canceled visits. I had told myself our bond was silent but strong. Now I knew the silence was not understanding. It was dislike. I had the rest of today. I had tonight. I had to prepare for tomorrow's performance. But my role was different now. I was no longer the unwitting audience. I was the director who had finally read the true script. I picked up the bowl of lemons from the table. Their bright, waxy skin was cool against my palms. I carried them to the counter and selected one. I took a knife and sliced it cleanly in half. The scent burst into the air, sharp and clean. I squeezed the juice into a small glass bowl, the seeds catching on my fingers. The action was useful. It had a beginning and an end. It produced something tangible. This is what I would do, I decided. I would perform the useful, tangible tasks. I would prepare the Sunday dinner. I would set the table with the good china. I would greet my daughter and her husband. And I would listen. I would listen to every word behind the words. I would watch the face she put on. And I would know for the first time that I was looking at a lie. The knowledge was a weight, but it was also a tool. It was the one true thing in the room now. Everything else, the love I thought we shared, the respect I believed I had earned, the history embodied in every object around me, had been called into question. But the message was real. Her voice was real. The sentiment was real. I finished juicing the lemon and wiped my hands. The kitchen was still full of light, but the quality of it had changed. It was no longer gentle. It was exposing. It showed every speck on the floor, every watermark on the faucet. It showed a woman in her late 50s, standing very still in the heart of a home that had just become a crime scene. The crime was not the message. The crime was the years of deception that preceded it. And I, the victim, was now the sole possessor of the truth. I had to decide what to build with it. But first, I had to get through Sunday. The china felt cool and heavy in my hands. I lifted each plate from the cabinet, checking for water spots before setting it on the dining table. The linen napkins, the polished silverware, the water glasses. Each placement was a deliberate step in a familiar ritual. Today, the ritual was an armor. The table was a stage. I was preparing for the first performance where I knew my lines were lies, and the other lead actress believed I was still an unwitting participant. The pot roast was in the oven, its aroma beginning to seep into the house. I had prepared it exactly as I always did, with the same herbs, the same timing. The consistency was important. Any deviation might be noticed, might signal that something was wrong. I needed everything to appear exactly as it always was. The doorbell rang at 2 o'clock precisely. I wiped my hands on my apron, took a slow breath, and walked to the front door. Ryan stood on the porch, holding a bottle of wine. Maya was half a step behind him. Her smile was already in place, wide and bright. It was the smile from the photograph in the kitchen, but now I saw the mechanics of it. The slight strain at the corners of her eyes. "Alina, you look wonderful," Ryan said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. He meant it. His warmth was a genuine physical pressure. "Mom," Maya stepped forward. She hugged me. Her perfume, the same one from last week, enveloped me. The hug was brief, her body stiff. She released me quickly, her hands fluttering to smooth her dress. "Something smells amazing, as usual." "Just the usual pot roast," I said, my voice even. I stepped back to let them in. "Come in, please." Ryan headed straight for the kitchen, calling over his shoulder about needing to open the wine to let it breathe. Maya hovered in the hallway, her eyes darting around as if seeing the space anew. Was she looking at her museum? Examining the exhibits. "It's so quiet in here," she said. Her tone was light, conversational. "It usually is," I replied. I turned and walked back toward the kitchen, not waiting to see if she followed. I heard her footsteps behind me. In the kitchen, Ryan was already at the counter, expertly uncorking the bottle. "How's the garden holding up, Eleanor? I saw your roses through the window. They're spectacular." "Thank you, Ryan. They're needing more water than I'd like. The weather has been dry." I busied myself with checking the roasting potatoes. The conversation was normal. It was a script we had performed 100 times. The difference was that I was now reading from a corrected copy. I listened to the subtext in every ordinary line. Maya leaned against the doorway. "Can I help with anything?" "You can carry the butter dish to the table," I said, without looking at her. I pointed to the small ceramic dish on the counter. She picked it up. Her movements were careful. We moved around each other in the kitchen, a practiced dance. She brought the butter. I brought the gravy boat. Ryan carried the wine and the glasses. We assembled the meal on the dining table. The good china gleamed under the chandelier. We sat. Ryan served the wine. I served the food. The roast was tender, the vegetables soft. The first few minutes were filled with the sounds of serving, the passing of dishes, the superficial compliments on the food. "So, how was your week?" I asked, looking at Ryan. It was safer to start with him. "Busy, but good. We closed the Anderson account on Thursday, big relief." He took a bite of roast. "This is incredible, Eleanor." Maya nodded, chewing slowly. "Yeah, work was intense, a lot of deadlines." Her answer was vague, wrote. She took a sip of water, not wine. "I imagine it's tiring," I said, directing my words to her. "Having to perform at such a high level all the time." She looked up from her plate. Her eyes met mine for a second, then flicked away. "It's part of the job." "Of course, I suppose we all perform in different ways." I cut a piece of meat. "We present a certain face to the world, to our families. It can be exhausting when that face doesn't match what's inside." The air in the room thickened. Ryan, oblivious, nodded in agreement. "Tell me about it. Client meetings are 90% performance." Maya was very still. She placed her fork down carefully. "What do you mean, Mom?" I looked at her directly. I held her gaze. "Just an observation. We all have roles we play, the dutiful daughter, the gracious mother. Sometimes the roles fit, sometimes they chafe." I allowed a small, polite smile. "More potatoes, Ryan." Ryan passed me his plate. Maya stared at her food. The performance was cracking, but only for me. I saw the slight tremor in her hand as she reached for her wine glass. She took a large drink. The conversation limped forward. Ryan carried most of it, talking about a planned vacation, a movie they had seen. Maya contributed short sentences. I responded appropriately. I asked questions. I nodded. Inside, I was a separate entity, watching the scene from a great height. I noted every forced laugh from Maya, every time her eyes grew distant while her mouth was smiling. During a lull, as Ryan was explaining a golf shot, Maya's eyes drifted to the sideboard. There was a silver frame there, holding a picture of her father and me on a long-ago vacation. Her expression changed. The polite mask slipped for an instant, replaced by something raw and unguarded. It looked like sorrow or maybe regret. Then she blinked, and the pleasant, attentive expression was back. But I had seen it. It was the first real thing she had shown me all day. It wasn't dislike. It was something more complicated. It did not absolve her, but it was a data point, a crack in her own facade. Dessert was apple pie. Coffee was served in the living room. The whole afternoon was a masterclass in sustained tension disguised as a family visit. Finally, Ryan looked at his watch. "We should probably get going. That was a feast, Eleanor, thank you." He stood, gathering the coffee cups. Maya stood up quickly, as if released from a trap. "Yes, thank you, Mom, everything was perfect." The word hung in the air, perfect asterisk. The museum was up to standard. At the door, there was another round of hugs. Ryan's was hearty. Maya's was again brief and stiff. I stood on the porch and watched them walk to their car. Maya did not look back. I closed the door. The silence of the house rushed back in, louder than before. I walked into the dining room. The table was a wreck of dirty dishes, half-eaten food, empty wine glasses. The performance was over. The actors had gone home. I did not begin to clean immediately. I stood there, looking at Maya's chair. At her napkin, crumpled on the table. At her plate, where she had left a piece of crust from the pie. She had gotten through it. She had worn the face, and I had watched her do it. The humiliation of the previous day was now compounded by the shared knowledge, though she did not know I possessed it. We had spent 3 hours mutually deceiving each other. The difference was that my deception was a conscious choice. Hers was a habit she thought was secret. I cleared the table. I washed the good china by hand, feeling the smooth glaze under my fingertips. Each cleaned plate was a step back into my own reality. The dinner had been a test. I had maintained my composure. I had even, with my comment about performances, planted a tiny, unsettling seed. I saw it land in the brief stillness that followed my words. But it was not enough. Enduring the dinner was passive. It was merely the first step. I had proven I could withstand the pretense. Now I needed to decide what to do with that ability. The memo was still a silent digital fact on my phone. The hurt was a cold, solid mass in my chest. Watching Maya struggle with her own act had not lessened it. It had given it a new, sharper shape. I finished the dishes and turned off the kitchen light. The house was dark and quiet. The museum was closed for the night. The curator was alone with the artifacts of a broken narrative, and tomorrow she would have to begin writing a new one. The sun was just above the fence line when I pushed open the back door. The air was cool and carried the damp, green scent of morning. I had slept little. The silence of the house had become a physical presence, a weight on my chest. I needed to move. I needed to do something with my hands that was not washing the relics of a false celebration. I went to the shed and took out my gardening gloves and a trowel. My flower beds lined the back fence, a mix of perennials and the roses Ryan had admired. I knelt on the foam pad, the dew soaking through my pants. I started with the weeds. They were small, opportunistic things growing between the lavender and the salvia. I gripped their bases and pulled. The roots came up with a soft, tearing sound from the earth. I worked methodically, moving down the row. The action was simple. Identify the intruder. Remove it. Clear the space for what was meant to be there. But my movements became less methodical. I saw a cluster of chickweed near the base of a peony and I attacked it, not with the trowel but with my gloved hands, clawing at the soil, pulling up chunks of root and dirt. I was breathing harder. The image of Maya's polite, vacant smile as she said "perfect" flashed behind my eyes. I dug harder. The peony's own roots were exposed, pale and vulnerable. I stopped, my hands clenched in the cold soil. This was not gardening. This was destruction. I sat back on my heels, wiping my forehead with my arm. I had to channel this energy, not waste it. Anger was a fuel, but it needed a controlled burn to be useful, not a wildfire that destroyed everything, including myself. I stood up and walked to the far corner of the garden. A rose bush was there, a David Austin variety I had planted years ago. It had never thrived in that spot. It produced few blooms, its leaves were often spotted. I had nursed it along out of stubbornness, but it was a losing battle. The soil was wrong. The light was wrong. It was surviving, but it was not living. I looked at it, this struggling plant. I had tried to force it to fit where I wanted it, ignoring its needs. The parallel was so obvious it felt like a sign. I could not force a relationship to thrive in conditions that poisoned it. Pretending otherwise was a disservice to us both. I returned to the shed for the shovel and a burlap sack. I began to dig around the rose bush, a wide circle, going deep to preserve as much of the root ball as possible. The work was physical and demanding. The shovel bit into the earth, my shoulders and back taking the strain. Sweat gathered at my temples. I focused entirely on the task, the angle of the shovel, the leverage of my foot, the careful loosening of the roots. After 20 minutes, I had the bush free. I lifted it, cradling the root mass in the burlap, and carried it across the garden to a sunnier spot near the patio, where the soil was richer. I dug a new hole, wider and deeper than the old one. I mixed in compost from the bin. I placed the rose bush in its new home, backfilling the soil, tamping it down gently with my hands. I watered it thoroughly until the earth was dark and saturated. It looked small and shocked in the open space, its canes bare. Transplant shock was a real risk. It might not survive the move, but if it did, it had a chance to become what it was meant to be. Here, it would either flourish or die honestly. No more slow, respectable decline in the wrong corner. I cleaned my tools and put them away. My body ached pleasantly. The chaotic energy had been spent and redirected into a single, concrete act. As I stood looking at the transplanted rose, my mind cleared. A direct confrontation would be like my initial weeding. Violent, messy, exposing raw roots to the air. It would satisfy a momentary impulse but likely kill any chance of a future, honest or not. What I needed was a transplant of the truth. I needed to move the fact of the memo from the dark, private corner where it had been festering and place it into the light between us. She needed to see it, to acknowledge it, and to understand that I had seen it. But I would control the conditions. I would not scream it. I would not weaponize it in anger. I would present it, calmly, deliberately, in a setting of my choosing. She had sent the truth to me, however accidentally. I would return it to her with full awareness. The decision settled inside me, a cold, hard certainty. The hurt did not disappear. It was simply compartmentalized, placed on a shelf to be examined later. Right now, I needed strategy. The next family dinner was a week away. That was too long. It gave the pretense time to re-solidify. I needed to act sooner to keep the crack from sealing over. I needed to begin applying gentle, consistent pressure. I needed to behave in ways that were subtly asterisk off asterisk. That would make her question my perception. That would fray the edges of her performance. I went inside and washed the garden soil from my hands. The water ran brown in the sink. I made a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table. I looked out at the garden. The rose bush was a small, dark shape in its new patch of earth. My course was set. I would not be the victim of her carelessness. I would be the architect of its consequences. The objective was no longer to endure the lie, but to systematically dismantle it. To force the real relationship, whatever it was, even if it was nothing, to stand in the light where we could both see it clearly. This was not about revenge in the petty sense. It was about recalibration. It was about pulling a weed that had been allowed to grow for too long, not with a furious yank, but with a firm, steady hand on the root. I finished my tea. The day was still young. I had planning to do. I waited 2 days. I occupied myself with small tasks. I organized the pantry. I cleaned out the linen closet. I read a novel but found myself rereading the same paragraph. The waiting was a discipline. It allowed the first move to settle in my mind, to become inevitable rather than impulsive. On Wednesday morning, I took the old recipe box down from the shelf. It was a wooden thing my husband had made for me early in our marriage. The cards inside were stained and soft at the edges from years of use. I flipped through them until I found the one I wanted, my grandmother's ginger snap recipe. The handwriting was my mother's, a loose, flowing script. I had made these cookies for Maya every Christmas. She had always claimed they were her favorite. I knew she did not have this recipe. I had offered to give it to her many times over the years. She had always waved me off. "I'll just get them from you, Mom," she'd say. "Yours are the best." It was a lazy compliment, a way to avoid the effort of learning. Now I saw it as part of the pattern. She enjoyed the performance of tradition without wanting the substance of it. I took a picture of the recipe card with my phone. The faded writing, the butter stain in the corner. I opened my text thread with Maya. The last message was the audio file I had labeled memo. I scrolled past it. My thumb hovered over the screen. This was the first calculated action. It was a test, a small, seemingly innocent probe. How would she react to a request that highlighted a thing she had neglected to learn? Would she be evasive? Would she lie and claim she had it? Her response would tell me about her current state of mind, about her guilt, about her willingness to continue the pretense under new, slightly strained conditions. I typed the message. "Good morning, Maya. I can't seem to find my copy of Grandma's ginger snap recipe. I thought I gave it to you last year. Do you have it handy?" I read it twice. The tone was normal. The question was plausible. The implication that I had given her something precious and she might have lost it was the subtle hook. I pressed send. I placed the phone on the kitchen table and went to water the transplanted rose. The leaves were looking less wilted. Small buds were forming. I examined it closely, checking for signs of stress. When I came back inside, 15 minutes had passed. There was no reply. This was also data. The Maya from 2 weeks ago would have answered quickly, perhaps with an easy lie. "I'll look for it," or "I think Ryan might have filed it somewhere." This silence was different. It was the silence of someone rereading a simple sentence, searching for traps. An hour later, my phone chimed. "Hey, Mom, I'm not sure where it is. I'll have to check my files at home. Things have been so hectic." I watched the 3 dots appear and disappear, then appear again. A second message followed. "Are you baking them for something special?" The questions were defensive. She was turning the focus back on me, trying to gauge my intent. I replied promptly, keeping my tone light. "No special occasion. Just had a craving. Don't worry if you can't find it. I'm sure I have it written down somewhere else." I wanted to apply pressure, then release it, to show I was not making a large demand, but also that I had noted her failure to meet a small one. The 3 dots appeared and hovered for a long time. Her next message was verbose, over-explaining. "I'm really sorry, Mom. I feel terrible. I know how much that recipe means to you. I've been meaning to organize all my recipes into a digital folder. I just haven't had the time. Work has been insane. I promise I'll look thoroughly tonight." Every sentence was an excuse. Every word confirmed her anxiety. The old Maya would have brushed it off with a laughing emoji. This Maya was flustered. She was offering apologies for a minor domestic oversight as if it were a major failing. Because to her, in the shadow of her secret, it likely felt like one. It was a crack in the perfect daughter facade, and she was scrambling to patch it. I wrote back, "Truly, it's fine, Maya. No need for apologies, it's just a recipe." I ended the exchange there. I did not add a heart emoji. I did not say, "love you." The absence of those normal signifiers was a tiny, deliberate coldness. She would feel it even if she could not name it. I put the phone away. The test was complete. It had worked exactly as I had hoped. Her reaction was not one of casual forgetfulness, but of heightened, guilty sensitivity. The memo had changed the landscape for her, too, though she thought she was navigating it alone. She was now walking on ground she perceived as unstable, listening for tremors. I returned the recipe card to its box. I had never lost it. It had been in its proper place all along. The entire exchange was a fabrication, a minor scene staged to observe her performance under new lighting. And she had performed poorly. She had shown me her nervousness. This was the beginning. A single, almost invisible wire had been strung across our path. She had tripped on it. She was now off balance. The next move would not be another question. It would be an observation. It would involve a third party. I needed to bring Ryan into the periphery of this, to see if his natural warmth and honesty could be used as a mirror to reflect the distortion back at her. But that would require another kind of opportunity, a casual, unplanned visit. I would not force it. I would let the pattern of our lives create the opening, and then I would step through it. For now, I had the satisfaction of a confirmed hypothesis. The pretense was fragile. My job was to apply the precise amount of pressure to make it crack, not shatter. Not yet. Ryan came by on Friday evening. I was on the porch, repotting a spider plant that had outgrown its container. The sky was turning a soft orange. I heard a car door shut, and then his familiar figure came up the walkway, holding a ceramic baking dish. "Eleanor, I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd return this." He held up the dish. It was the one from the Sunday dinner, washed and dried. I wiped my hands on my gardening apron. "Ryan, this is a surprise. Come sit." I gestured to the other wicker chair. "You didn't have to make a special trip." He placed the dish on the small table between us and sat down. He looked comfortable, but there was a slight hesitation in his movements. It was no trouble. I had an early meeting nearby, figured I'd drop it off before heading home. We sat in silence for a moment. The sounds of the neighborhood were settling into evening quiet. I waited. He had not come just for the dish. How have you been? He asked. His tone was careful. I've been well, keeping busy. The garden is a constant project. I gestured to the trowel and bag of soil beside my chair. How is work? Good, good, same as always. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He looked at his hands, then back at me. Actually, Alina, I wanted to ask you something. Maybe it's out of line. Ask anything, Ryan. We're family. My voice was calm, inviting. It's about Maya. He paused, searching for words. She's been, I don't know, stressed isn't quite the right word. On edge. Ever since last Sunday, really. She's short with me. She snaps over little things. Then she apologizes profusely. It's a cycle. I nodded slowly, showing I was listening. I picked up the trowel and absently scraped a bit of dried soil from its blade. I just wondered, he continued, if everything is okay between you two. Did something happen? I know she came over for lunch the other day. She was quiet when she got home. So the lunch with the recipe box had already occurred in the timeline. Good. She had carried the tension home with her. Ryan had felt it. I placed the trowel down. I looked at him directly. He had kind eyes, and in them I saw genuine concern, not accusation. He was a good man caught in the periphery of a storm he didn't understand. I'm sure she has her reasons for feeling stressed, I said, my words measured. Her job is demanding. There are many pressures. He nodded but didn't look satisfied. It just feels like more than work. It feels personal. And she seems, I don't know, almost guilty around you lately. The word hung in the air. Guilty asterisk. He had perceived it accurately. I chose my next sentence with precision. It was the cornerstone of this conversation. We all wear masks sometimes, don't we, Ryan? For our jobs, for our families. Sometimes the mask becomes heavy and it shows around the edges. The person wearing it gets tired. They might snap at those closest to them because those are the only people they feel they can snap at. I said it gently, as a philosophical observation, not about anyone in particular. Ryan's expression shifted from confusion to a dawning, troubled understanding. Masks, he repeated softly. He was quiet for a long moment. Do you think she's wearing a mask with you? I did not answer directly. Instead, I said, I think Maya is a complex person. She always has been. She feels things deeply. Sometimes I believe she thinks she needs to present a certain version of herself to me, a version she believes I expect. That would be a very heavy mask to wear. I paused, letting him absorb that. And if she's been wearing it for a long time, she might be exhausted. She might resent the mask, and by extension, the person she believes made her put it on. Ryan stared at me. I had just given him a key to a door he hadn't known was locked. I had framed Maya's behavior not as a simple mood, but as the symptom of a long-term, deep-seated conflict. And I had done it without blame, with apparent empathy. You think she feels she has to pretend with you? He asked, his voice low. I think, I said carefully, that honesty is a difficult gift to give and to receive. It requires courage. Pretense is often safer in the short term, but it builds a wall. And after a while, the person on the other side of the wall can only see the silhouette, not the real person. He sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. God, Alina, if that's true, that's so sad, and so unfair to you. Feelings are rarely fair, Ryan. They just are. I offered a small, resigned smile. Don't confront her with this. It's just my old woman speculation. But be gentle with her. If she's struggling with a performance, the last thing she needs is a critic. She needs someone who sees the person behind the role. I was giving him instructions, subtly guiding his behavior. I was turning him from a confused bystander into a conscious, if unknowing, ally. His natural decency would now be attuned to the idea of Maya's performance. He would watch for it, and in watching, he would see it more clearly. You're very wise, he said after a moment. He looked at me with a new respect, tinged with pity. He pitied me for being on the other side of my daughter's mask. This, too, was useful. I've just had more time to observe human nature, I said. I stood up, signaling the end of the heavy conversation. Can I get you some iced tea before you go? No, I should get back. He stood as well. He looked relieved, as if a burden had been shared, but also more burdened with new knowledge. Thank you, Alina. for being so understanding." "Always," I said. I walked him to the steps. He turned before leaving. "Take care of yourself, okay?" "I will, Ryan. You do the same." I watched him drive away. The sky was deepening into twilight. I remained on the porch, the cool air settling around me. The conversation had gone exactly as I had hoped. I had planted the idea in fertile soil. Ryan was an honest man. The concept of a sustained pretense would bother him. He would now interact with Maya with this lens. He might ask gentle questions. He might be less accepting of her evasions. He would become a living mirror, reflecting back to her the dissonance of her own act. This was the midpoint. An outsider was now partially aware of the fracture. The conflict was no longer contained between Maya and me. It had a witness, and a witness changes everything. It makes the stakes real. It makes the consequences social, not just personal. I gathered my gardening tools. The spider plant, now in its new pot, looked healthy and robust. It would grow new shoots, which I could separate and plant to create new plants. One action leading to multiple possible futures. I carried everything inside. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt like a museum. It felt like a command center. I had just deployed a quiet, effective agent. The plan was progressing. The mask was getting heavier for her to wear. And now, someone else was watching it slip. I called Maya on Tuesday. The phone rang 4 times before she answered. Her voice was cautious. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said, my tone deliberately warm. "I was just thinking it's been a while since we had a proper visit. Ryan mentioned you've been busy. I made that chicken salad you used to like. Would you have time for lunch tomorrow, just us?" A pause. I could hear the calculation on the other end of the line. A refusal would be rude, and rudeness would be a deviation from her role. An acceptance would put her back in the museum, under the new, suspicious lighting. "Just us," she repeated. "Just us, a quiet lunch, no fuss." I made it sound like a gift, not a summons. "Okay, sure, that sounds nice. What time?" 1 o'clock, I'll see you then." I spent the next morning preparing. The chicken salad was easy. I set the small table in the sunroom with everyday plates. The informality was important. This was not a staged Sunday dinner. This was to feel like an intimate, off-script moment. The box was in the hall closet, on a high shelf. A simple cardboard storage box labeled Maya's things in my husband's handwriting. I carried it to the sunroom and placed it on the floor beside my chair. I did not open it. She arrived exactly at 1. She was dressed in work clothes, a sleek blouse and trousers, as if she had come from the office or needed the armor of professionalism. She carried a small bouquet of flowers from the grocery store, a peace offering or a prop. "These are for you," she said, handing them to me. "Thank yous, they're lovely." I took them and put them in water. We did not hug. We sat at the table. The chicken salad was on the table along with a bowl of fruit. We made small talk. She asked about the garden. I asked about a project at her work. The conversation was brittle, skimming the surface like a stone. We ate. The food was good, but it was just fuel. The real meal was yet to be served. When we had finished, I did not clear the plates immediately. I sipped my water. I looked at her. She was folding her napkin into smaller and smaller squares. "I was doing some organizing the other day," I said, my voice conversational. "I came across this." I leaned down and lifted the box onto the table between us. The sound of the cardboard scraping on the wood was loud. Maya stared at the box. She recognized her father's handwriting. Her face went very still. "What's in it?" "Just some old things of yours, from school. I thought you might enjoy seeing them." I opened the flaps. The smell of old paper and childhood rose from inside. I reached in and pulled out the first item. It was a large sheet of construction paper, faded to orange. Crayon drawings of stick figures. At the bottom, in a teacher's hand, it said, "My Family" by Maya Banks, age 5. There was a tall figure labeled Dad, a medium figure labeled Mom, and a small figure with a huge smile labeled me. Above us, a yellow sun beamed. I laid it on the table, smoothing the curled edges. "You always drew me with a very large smile," I said. Maya said nothing. She looked at the drawing as if it were a document in a foreign language. I reached in again, a card made from folded notebook paper. On the front, colored hearts. Inside, in a child's uneven script, "To the best mom in the world, I love you to the moon and back. Love, Maya." It was from a long ago Mother's Day. I placed it next to the drawing. I did not comment on it. Next, a report card from 3rd grade. Teacher's comment, "Maya is a joy to have in class, so thoughtful and kind." I put it down. A poem written in middle school for an assignment. The title was My Anchor. The poem described coming home to the smell of cooking, to a calm voice, to a hug that makes the scary world outside go away. I read it silently to myself, then set it face up on the growing pile. I continued. Birthday cards, a plaster handprint, a letter from summer camp, written on lined paper, describing how much she missed home. Each item was a fossil of a past emotion. Each one testified to a feeling that had once been real, or had at least been expressed as real. I arranged them on the table like exhibits in a silent courtroom. I did not look at Maya. I looked at the artifacts. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. The box was not empty, but I stopped. The table was covered. The sun streamed in, illuminating the childish handwriting, the bright crayon, the earnest declarations of love. The silence stretched. It was a heavy, saturated silence, filled with the ghosts of 1,000 past moments. I finally lifted my eyes to her. She was pale. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white. She was staring at the poem, My Anchor. Her lower lip trembled, and she pressed her lips together to stop it. "Do you remember writing this?" I asked softly, tapping the poem. She gave a quick, jerky nod. She could not speak. "It's a beautiful poem," I said. "You had a talent for words." I began to gather the items, not hastily, but with a reverent care. I returned them to the box, one by one, in no particular order. The handprint, the report card, the Mother's Day card, the family drawing, lastly the poem. I placed them all inside and closed the flaps. The table was clear again, save for our empty lunch plates. The box sat between us, now just a box of old paper, but the air was charged. Maya cleared her throat. Her voice was a dry whisper. "Why did you show me those?" "I thought you might like to see them," I said, my tone neutral. "They're your history. They're evidence of who you were." I paused, then added, "It's important to remember where we came from, even if where we are now is different." She stood up so abruptly her chair legs scraped the floor. "I should go. I have a conference call." "Of course. Thank you for coming, Maya." She almost fled from the sunroom. I heard the front door open and close. The house was quiet again. I sat for a long time, looking at the box. I had not accused her. I had not mentioned the memo. I had simply presented the evidence of a former truth. The contrast between that evidence and her current reality was the accusation. It had been far more effective than any words I could have shouted. She had felt the weight of it. I had seen it in her blanched face and her trapped animal eyes. The psychological pressure had been applied precisely and without mercy. The crack had widened. She was no longer just nervous. She was haunted. I carried the box back to the hall closet and returned it to its high shelf. Then I cleared the lunch dishes. I washed them slowly, the warm water running over my hands. The performance was over. The audience of one had been profoundly affected. The curator had made her point. The next move would be hers. I had forced her to confront the ghost of her former self. How she reacted would determine the final act. The silence after Maya left was different from the silence before she arrived. It was an active silence, vibrating with the echo of her panic. I knew she would not call for a few days. She needed to process the assault of memory. I went about my routines. I watered the garden. The transplanted rose had new green leaves. It was going to survive. 2 days later, on Thursday evening, my phone rang. It was Maya. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was strained, overly bright. "Maya, how are you?" "I'm okay, just tired. Listen, I wanted to thank you for lunch the other day. It was nice." "It was my pleasure." I waited. "I've been thinking," she said, the words coming in a rush. Maybe we should do a family dinner again soon. I could cook, at our place, give you a break from hosting. The offer was defensive. It was an attempt to reset the dynamic, to move the theater of operations to her territory, where she might feel more in control. Or perhaps it was a genuine, if clumsy, overture. That's a kind offer, I said. But you know me, I enjoy cooking for everyone. It's no trouble. It's just that you always go to so much effort. The perfect pot roast, the perfect table. Her tone shifted, almost imperceptibly. A hint of brittleness, a sharp edge. It's a lot to live up to, you know. Sometimes I think you forget that not every meal has to be a perfect production. There it was, the slip. The resentment coiled beneath the surface had finally struck out. The word perfect was no longer a bland compliment. It was a barb. The line was quiet for a beat. I could hear her sharp intake of breath, as if she had just realized what she had said. I did not react with hurt. I did not react with anger. I used the calm, clear tone I had been practicing in my mind. I've always preferred honesty to perfection, Maya. A simple, true meal is better than a spectacular false one. Don't you agree? The silence on the other end was profound. I could almost hear the blood draining from her face. My words were a direct counter to her complaint, but more than that, they were a philosophical statement that cut to the heart of our situation. Honesty over perfection, truth over pretense. She was scrambling. I didn't mean it like that. Your cooking is wonderful, I just meant. It's fine, Maya, I interrupted, my voice still even. I understand what you meant. The pressure of expectations can be burdensome for everyone involved. Another loaded silence. I had reframed her criticism as a shared burden, but in doing so, I had acknowledged the pressure existed. I had confirmed that I understood the subtext. I should go, she said, her voice small. Of course, talk soon. I hung up the phone. I stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I had first heard the memo. The circle was tightening. Her control was slipping. The mask was not just heavy now, it was cracking under the pressure of her own guilt and my relentless, quiet mirroring. Later that night, Ryan called. His voice was concerned. Eleanor, hi, sorry to call so late. It's no trouble, Ryan. Is everything all right? It's Maya. She's really upset. She said she had a phone call with you earlier and she thinks she offended you. She's been crying on and off for an hour. I felt a cold satisfaction. The pressure was working. She was unraveling. Offended me? No, Ryan, we had a conversation. She made an observation about my cooking being a perfect production. I simply said I valued honesty over perfection. It was a conversation about philosophy, not a personal critique. Ryan sighed, a weary sound. She took it personally. She thinks you were, I don't know, criticizing her for not measuring up, or maybe for being dishonest. She's in a real state. Ryan, I said, my voice gentle, do you remember our talk on the porch about masks and performances? Yes, his voice was solemn. I think the mask is becoming uncomfortable. The person wearing it is starting to feel its edges dig in. That's a painful process, but it's a necessary one if she ever wants to take it off. I was speaking in code, but he was now fluent in this language. Be patient with her. This isn't about a pot roast. You're sure you're not angry? He asked. I am not angry, I said, and it was the truth. Anger had been refined into something else, a resolved, surgical intent. I am observant, and I want what's real for all of us, even if it's difficult. After I hung up with Ryan, I remained at the kitchen table. The house was dark. I replayed the phone call with Maya in my head, the sarcastic bite in her voice when she said perfect production, the immediate regret, my measured, devastating response. She knew now. She might not know about the memo specifically, but she knew asterisk something had changed. She knew I was no longer the oblivious audience. She knew her lines were not landing as they used to. The stage was tilting beneath her feet. This was the critical phase. A cornered animal can either flee or attack. I had to be prepared for either. A full, tearful confession was possible. A defensive, angry outburst was equally likely, or she might retreat further into sullen silence. My next move had to be the final one, the dinner. I had to create the setting where the truth could be presented not as an attack, but as an undeniable fact, where she would have no room for evasion and where there would be a witness, Ryan, to ensure the reality of the moment was fixed. The time for subtle pressure was over. The crack had been widened. Now it was time to open the door behind it. I picked up my own phone and looked at the audio file labeled memo. I would need to play only a second of it, just enough for her voice to name the crime. The rest would be in her face, in Ryan's shock, in the terrible, clarifying silence that would follow. I had preferred honesty to perfection. Soon, I would have it, however messy it might be. I made the call on Friday morning. The sun was bright and the house was quiet. I dialed Maya's number. She answered on the second ring. "Mom." "Maya, I'd like you and Ryan to come for dinner tomorrow night. A proper dinner." My voice was firm, leaving no room for the casual refusal she might attempt. A beat of silence. "Tomorrow, is everything okay?" "Everything is fine. I just think it's time we all sat down together. I'm making the beef bourguignon." It was a dish that required hours of preparation, a signal that this was no ordinary meal. "Okay, sure, we can do that. What time?" 7 o'clock. Please don't be late." I ended the call before she could ask more questions. The stage was set. Now I had to prepare the scene. I began with myself. I went to my closet and chose a dress I had not worn in years. It was a simple sheath of navy blue linen, elegant and severe. I had worn it to a library fundraiser my husband and I attended the year before he passed. It was a dress of significance, of public facing. I laid it on my bed. I selected a single strand of pearls, my uniform. Next, the table. I did not use the everyday dishes. I used the formal china, the same pattern from the disastrous Sunday dinner. But this time, the setting was different. I placed the plates with exacting precision, measuring the distance from the table edge with my finger. The silverware was polished until it reflected the overhead light like a dull mirror. I used the crystal water glasses, not the everyday tumblers. I folded the linen napkins into sharp, precise rectangles. The table was a grid of cold order. The centerpiece was not flowers. I took a simple, clear glass vase and filled it with water. I placed a single white calla lily in it. The stem was straight and green, the bloom a stark, clean curve. It was beautiful, but it was not warm. It was a statement of minimalist intent. In the kitchen, I began the bourguignon. I chopped onions, carrots, and garlic. I browned the beef in batches. I opened a bottle of red wine and poured it into the pot. The ritual of cooking was meditative. Each step was a known quantity. I did not rush. I allowed the flavors to develop over the low, steady heat. The aroma filled the house, a deep, rich scent that normally promised comfort. Today, it was a lure. In the late afternoon, I checked the audio file on my phone. I opened the folder, found the one labeled memo. I tapped it to play, then immediately paused it. I needed to know the exact second where the key phrase began. I played it slowly, dragging my finger across the waveform. There, the spike in the audio where her voice tightened. "I can't keep pretending to like her." I let it play just past that sentence, to include the damning follow-up about the museum and the performance. Then I stopped it. I practiced tapping the screen to start at that precise moment. I did this 3 times. It needed to be seamless. I placed my phone on the small sideboard in the dining room, next to my seat. I plugged it into a portable speaker, a small, discreet one I used for listening to podcasts while gardening. I tested the connection. A tap on the screen, and her voice would fill the room, clear and undeniable. I returned to the kitchen and prepared the rest of the meal. Roasted potatoes with rosemary, haricots verts with almonds, a simple salad, a chocolate torte for dessert. Each component was classic, executed with care. It was not a meal designed for joy. It was a meal designed for consequence. At 6:30, I went upstairs and put on the dress. I fastened the pearls. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was composed. My eyes were calm. The woman looking back at me was not a hurt mother. She was a presiding officer. I applied a light lipstick, a neutral color. I brushed my hair. Every action was part of the uniforming. I came downstairs and did a final walkthrough. The dining room was a still life of anticipation. The kitchen was ordered, the food resting at the correct temperatures. The house was spotless. The museum was prepared for its most important exhibition, the truth. I poured myself a small glass of water and stood in the living room, waiting. I did not sit. I remained standing, my posture straight. I watched the clock. At 5 minutes to 7, headlights swept across the front window. A car door closed, then another. Footsteps on the walkway. The doorbell rang. I walked to the door, my steps measured. I opened it. Ryan stood there, holding a bottle of wine, his face open and smiling. Maya was beside him. She was wearing a black dress, simple and expensive. Her makeup was flawless, but her eyes were wide, the pupils dark. She looked like she was preparing for a funeral. "Alina, you look stunning," Ryan said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "Thank you, Ryan. Come in." Maya's eyes scanned me, taking in the dress, the pearls, the composed demeanor. Her smile was a tense line. "Hi, Mom." "Hello, Maya." I stepped back. "Dinner is ready. Shall we go straight to the table?" I led them into the dining room. I saw Ryan's glance take in the formal setting, the single lily. He looked puzzled but said nothing. Maya's gaze swept the room and landed on my phone, sitting innocuously on the sideboard next to the speaker. Her breath hitched just slightly. "Please sit," I said, indicating their places. We sat. The stage was set. The actors were in place. The final act could begin. The meal began. I served the bourguignon, the rich sauce glistening under the chandelier. Ryan complimented the food with his usual sincerity. Maya ate in small, careful bites as if each mouthful required concentration. The conversation was a series of polite, shallow exchanges. The weather, a movie Ryan wanted to see, the dryness of the summer. I participated just enough to maintain the facade. I nodded. I offered brief replies. My attention was on the rhythm of the evening, on the gradual progression from one course to the next. The salad was cleared. The main course was finished. I brought out the chocolate torte and placed it in the center of the table. I served 3 slices. Ryan took a bite and closed his eyes. "Alina, this is incredible." Maya poked at her slice with her fork. She had not eaten much. Her eyes kept flicking to the sideboard. "It's very rich," she said. "It's meant to be," I replied. I ate a small piece of my own dessert. The chocolate was dense and bitter. It suited the occasion. When we had all set our forks down, the silence that followed was different from the pauses during the meal. This silence had a finality to it. The ordinary script of a family dinner had been exhausted. Ryan leaned back in his chair, looking contented. Maya sat rigidly, her hands folded in her lap. I looked at each of them. Then I pushed my chair back slowly and stood up. "There's one more thing," I said. My voice was calm, clear. It cut through the quiet room. I walked to the sideboard. I picked up my phone. I could feel Maya's gaze like a physical pressure on my back. Ryan watched, curious. I turned to face the table, the phone in my hand. I did not sit down. I remained standing, looking directly at my daughter. "I found something of yours, Maya," I said. The words were precise, delivered without inflection. "I believe you sent it to the wrong person." Her face drained of all color. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Ryan looked from her to me, his brow furrowed in confusion. I tapped the screen. The audio file began to play. Her voice, tight and conspiratorial, filled the dining room. "I can't keep pretending to like her." The words hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. The recording continued for 2 more seconds, just enough to hear the bitter edge in her next phrase. "That house feels like a museum." I tapped the screen again. Silence. It was absolute. Ryan was frozen, his eyes wide with shock, fixed on Maya. Maya was a statue of horror, her hand pressed over her mouth. The china, the crystal, the single white lily, everything in the room seemed to lean in, witnesses to the rupture. I placed the phone on the table. I kept my eyes on Maya. My expression was not one of anger. It was one of profound, weary sorrow, and beneath that, an unshakable resolve. "Would you like to explain?" I asked, my voice still terrifyingly even. "What you can't pretend anymore." Maya made a small, choked sound. Her eyes were huge, glistening with tears of panic and shame. She shook her head, a tiny, frantic motion. Ryan found his voice first. It was a whisper. Maya, what is this? When did you? She turned to him, her movement jerky. It was a bad moment. I was stressed. I didn't mean for her to hear it. The words tumbled out, a desperate, inadequate defense. But you meant it, I stated. It was not a question. You spoke a truth to your husband. You just never intended for me to know it. That is the only part you regret. She looked back at me, the tears now spilling over. Mom, Stop, I said. The word was quiet, but it stopped her breath. Do not call me Mom in that voice. Not now. The performance is over. We are past the point of pretend endearments. She flinched as if I had struck her. Ryan reached out a hand toward her, then pulled it back, his own face a mask of conflict. He was loyal to her, but he was also a moral man. He had just heard his wife declare her dislike for the woman he respected. The cognitive dissonance was paralyzing him. I remained standing. I was the fixed point in the collapsing room. For 2 weeks, I said, I have known. I have listened to you pretend. I have watched you wear the face. I have tested it. I have shown you the evidence of what we once were, and all the while I have carried this. I gestured to the phone. I want to understand, Maya, not the excuse of stress. The reason. When did you start pretending, and why did you think you had to? It was not a scream for answers. It was a cold, formal inquiry. I was demanding an accounting. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The tears were real now, not performative. They were the tears of someone whose carefully constructed world had just been vaporized by 3 seconds of their own recorded voice. Ryan stood up. He looked lost. Eleanor, maybe we should. No, Ryan, I said, my gaze still on Maya. You are here as a witness. You heard the message. You are part of this reality now. Please sit. He sat down slowly, heavily, his eyes on his wife's bowed head. I waited. I gave her the silence. I let the weight of what she had done and what I had revealed press down on her. There would be no easy escape into hysterics. There would be no dramatic exit. There was only this table, this truth, and the terrible necessity of what came next. She finally lowered her hands. Her makeup was ruined. Her eyes were red. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw no mask. I saw raw, unvarnished pain and a flicker of something that might have been fear of me. I don't know, she whispered, her voice broken. I don't know when it started. It was an admission, the first one. It was not an explanation, but it was a beginning. The wall was down. The museum was empty. We were now in a different, uncharted space. I don't know when it started. Her words hung in the air, a confession of confusion rather than malice. Ryan was staring at her, his face pale. The shock was receding, replaced by a dawning, hurt comprehension. Maya wiped her face with her napkin, the linen smearing her mascara. She took a shuddering breath. It wasn't always like this, but somewhere along the way it became a thing I had to do, be a certain way. You were always so put together, so capable. The perfect house, the perfect garden, the perfect meals. You never seemed to struggle. I felt like I was always coming up short, like I was a messy draft of a person you'd already perfected. I listened. I did not interrupt. I had asked for the reason, and she was giving it to me in broken pieces. When I got a promotion, you said you were proud, but then you asked if the long hours were worth missing time for a family. When I bought the modern furniture, you said it was stylish, but you wondered if it was comfortable. Everything I did felt like it was being measured against some invisible standard, your standard. And I could never quite meet it, so I stopped trying to meet it. I just started pretending the measurements didn't matter, pretending I didn't care. And then, pretending became pretending to like the person holding the measuring tape. Her voice broke on the last words. Ryan reached out and took her hand. He didn't look at me. His loyalty was shifting to his wife in her pain, and I understood that. It was natural. I never knew you felt measured, I said, my voice low. I asked about the long hours because I worried about your stress, not to criticize your priorities. I asked about the furniture because I associated home with comfort, not as a judgment of your style. I paused. But your perception is your reality. If you felt judged, that is what matters. My intention is irrelevant. This was a difficult truth for me to speak. It acknowledged that my actions, however well meant, had been weaponized by her insecurity. It did not excuse her dishonesty, but it provided a context. "I should have talked to you," Maya whispered. "Instead, I talked about you. To Ryan, it was cowardly and cruel. I am so sorry, Mom, not just that you heard it, that I felt it, that I let it fester." The apology was real. I could hear the difference. This was not the flustered excuse over the recipe. This was shame articulated. "Thank you for the apology," I said. "I did not say I forgive you." Forgiveness was not a switch to be flipped. It was a process, and we were at the very beginning. But an apology does not reset the clock. It does not erase the memo or the weeks of pretense that I now know preceded it. Ryan finally spoke, his voice thick. "What happens now?" I looked at him, then at Maya. "Now we establish a new basis for our relationship, one built on honesty, however uncomfortable. The pretense is over. If you dislike a meal, you may say so. If you find my questions intrusive, you may tell me. If you cannot visit, you will say you do not want to, not that you are too busy." I turned my gaze fully to Maya. "In return, I will not play the role of the unassuming mother. I will be direct. I will call out disrespect. I will not participate in charades. Our relationship will be smaller, perhaps. It will certainly be less familiar, but it will be real." Maya nodded slowly, tears still streaming. "I don't know if I know how to do that." "You will learn, or we will have a very distant but honest acquaintance. Both are preferable to the lie." The finality in my voice was clear. This was not a negotiation. It was a statement of terms. Ryan stood up. "I think we should go, let everyone process." He helped Maya to her feet. She was unsteady. They walked to the door. Maya turned before leaving. Her eyes were swollen, her face blotchy. She looked like a child who had been thoroughly scolded. "I do love you, Mom, even when I don't like you very much. That part wasn't a lie." "I believe you," I said, and I did. Love and resentment could coexist. They had been doing so in her heart for years. "Good night, Maya, Ryan." I closed the door. I did not watch them drive away. I went directly to the dining room. The ruined dessert, the cold coffee, the single lily. I cleared the table with methodical motions. I did not feel triumph. I felt a vast, hollow fatigue. The battle was over. The field was scorched. I finished cleaning and turned off all the lights. I could not sleep. I went to the back door, slipped on my garden shoes, and stepped outside. The dawn was just beginning to lighten the sky, a pale gray wash at the horizon. The air was cool and clean. I walked to the transplanted rose bush. In the faint light, I could see it. New growth. Several healthy green leaves and one small, tight bud forming. It had survived the shock. It was putting down roots in its new soil. I knelt on the damp grass. I did not think of the past weeks. I did not think of Maya's tear-streaked face or the sound of her voice on the recording. I thought of the rose. I thought of the careful digging, the amending of the soil, the risk of moving it. It had been a violent act in its way, but a necessary one. The relationship I had with my daughter was now like this plant. Uprooted from the familiar, shady corner of pretense where it was dying and placed in the brighter, harsher light of truth. It was smaller. It was vulnerable. It might not survive in this new form, but if it did, it would be stronger. It would be real. I stood up as the first true rays of sun broke over the fence. The garden emerged from the shadows, defined and clear. There was grief in this new silence, a profound sense of loss for the easy, trusting bond I had believed we had. That bond was gone, and it would not come back. But the lie was also gone. The exhausting performance was over. The museum was closed. I was no longer a curator of exhibits, nor an unwitting exhibit myself. I was just a woman in her garden at dawn, looking at a rose bush that had a chance. I went inside as the sun warmed my back. The house was quiet, but the quiet was no longer accusatory. It was simply quiet, my own. I had reclaimed my narrative. I had traded a beautiful falsehood for a painful, fragile truth. It was not a happy ending, but it was an honest one. And for now, in the clean light of morning, that was enough.